I do have lots of hours in a Deep of Night. I've played with every single character, done lots of testing, and I also just have builds made for every single character as well that I am going to share with you guys today. I am pretty confident in the builds that I have made, so I just want to just tell you guys my thought process behind the relics that I do choose and which ones you should be looking out for every particular character. Now to start off with the Wilder, there are like 3 different builds that I do have. There's like a regular generic one and there's like 2 different variants of a critical attack build. But starting off with just like the basic generic build, the reason why we have a basic generic build is because the Wilder can be a pretty basic and generic character. He is very good with basically every single weapon in the game, so there really isn't necessarily a very specific thing for him to build in towards, so you can just go ahead and just go all into his neutral game. He has lots of really good character-specific relics, so you can just freely go into any single one of them. Like every single one of his character-specific relic perks are really good, and I have some with some very good rolls, like the +1 character skill with some vigor and ult charge, the fire attack follow-up with partial HP restoration and fire attack up. Now, I don't necessarily like the fire attack follow-up the most, but it is good to have early game. But once you get later into the game, there might be some other weapon types not named great swords that you might end up using instead, and this perk is going to be useless to you, but it's still great to have. And also have the ult attack up with the fire effect, which just pretty much doubles the damage of your ultimate attack, which is amazing. And then have it in combination with Evergel. Now, in this meta with Deep of Night, Evergel is not going to really be as important, being that some of the enemies that can spawn out can be very obnoxious, and you're probably just not even worth fighting some of them. Night Invader can be more reliable, specifically when you are playing in a group. But I didn't really have Night Invader alongside like a really good role, so I'm just going to stick with Evergel. But the only reason I would still actually use Evergel in this instance is because I have it in combination with a decent perk. I wouldn't actually use like that generic relic, that yellow relic that actually has the Evergel with the Stone Sword key. I wouldn't really dedicate an entire relic slot to Evergel anymore. And I only really would run it in an instance like this, because there's going to be plenty of times where you either just don't really get an Evergel or only get like 1 or 2. There aren't really many games where you're going to be getting like 4 or 5 plus consistently. So yeah, that's the thought process behind that. As for the Deep Relics, pretty much the exact same thing, just boost your neutral game. So partial HP restoration +1, which does stack with the regular version, affinity damage negation. The character skill inflicts blood loss is actually very good. It did just recently get buffed. It's just nice utility to be able to just kill trash mobs a bit faster. And with the +1 grapple, you can just keep spamming it against the boss over and over again. You don't even have to like commit to the entire thing. You can just cancel it every time. Just do a bit of chip damage, stop enemies from regenerating their poise, and potentially just like proc bleed at least like once a fight. And I do have it in a combination with more ultimate charge with a critical hit, and you should be getting lots of critical hit opportunities with the Wilder with his ultimate attack anyway, because it does a lot of stance damage, and every single time you get the crit after the ult, you're probably getting about 10% of it back automatically. Now this last relic, I kind of want to switch it out. I don't really like it as much. Like, it has physical attack up +4. It has improved physical damage negation +1, but it does come in combination with some pretty bad negative modifiers, like repeated evasions I don't really love, as reduced flask FP restoration, or HP restoration, but it did come with poison attack up, or attack up against poisoned enemies +2, and I have a regular one over here. So if I end up finding a poisoned weapon, it can be pretty nice. And if I'm playing in teams, more likely than not, I might stumble across an IRONEYE teammate, and they always have like poison builds nowadays, so it's pretty decent. But the build that I like to run more so, specifically in solo, is a critical attack build, because now you can actually get critical attack bonuses in your deep relic slots, and you can just stack them all up and just essentially have like 6 critical hit boosts if you wanted to. Because yes, if you don't know, they do stack. You can go ahead and test it out yourself if you don't believe me. But every single one is going to be like 17% more critical hits damage. Now, the downside of this playstyle is that you're going to have to find... Well, there's many different downsides. One is that you're going to have to find a good stance breaking weapon so you can reliably get a stance break to get the critical hits. And the best stance breaking weapons out there will be fist weapons and hammers, which you can run dormant powers to get it. But the reason I have another one with dormant powers, so don't worry about that. But the reason why I'm not running it for this one is because there's always a decent chance that the merchant does sell either a hammer or a fist weapon, and those charged heavy attacks can output some decent stance damage. And when I do get a critical hit, or when I do get a stance break, I can maybe potentially try and find a dagger to get a critical hit off and just get a lot of damage that way. But I'm not just running all critical hit boosting stuff. I also have some things to get my ultimate back quickly, because my ultimate also does very high stance damage. And every single time that I use my ult, I'm probably just going to be able to get a critical hit too. So every single time I get a critical hit, I get a whole bunch more ult charge back. And when I defeat enemies, I'm going to get a bunch more back as well. Unfortunately, once again, it comes to like repeated evasions, lower damage negation, which I don't love. But the WYLDER has like, you know, a good passive that keeps him alive. So it's not the worst thing in the world. Also, just wanted to run partial HP restoration once again, because it synergizes perfectly with damage negation at full HP. And it came with physical attack up +3 as well. The reduced dexterity and faith, not a big deal whatsoever. Now, the build that I do want to run sometimes when I just struggle to find fist weapons or hammers will be this one. I don't really run as many critical hit buffs, but I do have dormant fist, and so I can just like almost guarantee something like a iron balls or a star fist every single run. Any other fist weapon will be perfectly fine, because you can at least one-hand it and get really fast charged heavy attacks that way, except for when using the Kestis. The Kestis is the only fist weapon heavy attack, whether it's one-handed or two-handed. It's not going to do that really quick animation and not going to stance break as quickly. But yeah, fist weapons can do perfectly fine when it comes to stance breaking, or they're going to do it like probably the best out of all the other weapon types. So having dormant fists can be extremely powerful, and fist weapons are going to do the most damage with the WYLDER. I know a lot of people might want to use like Raider with the fist weapons, but it doesn't really make much sense, because one, the WYLDER also has good synergy with his ultimate attack and being able to get it back faster with these like perks that give him an ult charge on a crit, and his ultimates can also just stance break quickly too, which better synergizes with the critical hits. And yeah, he's just going to get more damage with fist weapons and potentially hammers too. Because yeah, the Raider doesn't really get a good dexterity scaling, and all these other weapon types actually get somewhat of a dexterity scaling. Now, getting into the Guardian, there are like two separate builds that I do run with him, both of which are just going to be guard countering builds. One I do have that just has like a bunch of just guard countering buffs, because yeah, every single one of these guard counter boosts do stack with each other, and these +2 guard counter boosts can give you 26% more damage to your guard counters. And yeah, these halberd charged guard counter damage can just be absolutely ridiculous. But the most important thing when running the Guardian, the most important relic is going to be this one right here. Successful guards sent out a shockwave while the ability is active. Obviously, the playstyle with the Guardian is shield based. If you don't want to use the shield, there is no reason to use the Guardian. And this is the most important perk, because it allows you to do damage when blocking, doing stance damage, and most importantly, it does stagger so many enemies and interrupt them out of their attack combos, so you can just like freely get your guard counter off. But outside of that, you just want to have this guard countering boost. I do have some like very good rolls, like this top one here is this is insane. This guard counter boost based on HP, when you are at max HP, you are going to get roughly 30% more guard counter damage to your halberds. Now, this one doesn't actually stack with like itself, so you can't run like a second one of these, but it is going to stack with all the other regular guard counter buffs. And it did come in combination with the heavy attack halberd, which is fantastic, because the heavy attack whirlwind actually makes it do more damage than like a colossal weapon heavy attack with this character too. And it came with HP on guarding, which yeah, I can't complain about this. This is like a 10 out of 10. Now, I do have the Shockwave alongside Night Invader. As I mentioned, if you were going to run teams, you kind of want to run at least either Everjail or Night Invader, just to be able to get a bit of passive damage by clearing at certain points of interest. Not going to be the most important thing. Like, I would only run it if you have it in combination with some other decent stuff. And I also do have the increased duration of the character skill, which is great for stun locking trash mobs. And it came with guard counters and partial HP restoration, like another pretty much god roll. I don't really care much for the continuous whirlwind as much as some of these other ones, but the fact that it's there, not going to complain. This shit's amazing. Now, as for the deep relics, as I mentioned, we're just going to be running a bunch of guard counter buffs. I do have this amazing one that actually came with the character skill boosts damage negation of yourself and nearby allies, which it is like a 12% damage negation boost for 30 seconds. And it came with +2 guard counters, and more damage after evasion doesn't really matter as much when you are playing the Guardian, because you want to block most of the time. But unfortunately, it came with dormant colossal weapons, which colossal weapons aren't like the worst for guard countering, but I still want to have the halberds, because the charged guard counter is just so invaluable. So like, It's such a great relic, but this just makes me not want to use it, and I hate it. I do also have the improved strength and dexterity and reduced vigor. This pretty much lets the Guardian have just as much strength and dexterity as the Wilder, but he's also just going to have just as much health as the Wilder. So it pretty much just gives him Wilder stats, but obviously he's still going to have the same guard countering playstyle. I kind of like this one more for teams than I do like it for solo, because in solo you're going to get plenty of fine damage anyway out of your guard counter boosts. And a little bit of extra health might be more important in solo, where you can't really like revive as much as you think. Because yeah, in teams, if you just get hit, you can just get revived like endless amount of times. So it's not really going to be as important. But yeah, just having a bunch more guard counter boost, you can never go wrong with. This one actually came in combination with a regular guard counter. Unfortunately, it wasn't +2, but I can't really complain that it actually came together. Like, it's pretty good. But the other build that I do run with the Guardian is this one right here. Now, it's not going to have as many guard counter boosts, but it does have some other things that make it more easy to use. And the major one being is a stamina recovery on landing attacks. Now, what this actually does is obviously every single time you land an attack, you're going to get a bit of stamina back. And this actually gives you 2 stamina, and this +1 version of the Everdark Gladius relic gives you 3 stamina back. And they're both going to stack. And any single time that I block with the passive, it's going to do that little bit of an AoE and give you a bunch of stamina back, which is huge because it just lets you just continuously block just longer types of combos, which is very important at later depths, because early game Guardian can be incredibly obnoxious, because even if you are just fighting regular basic trash mobs or basic bosses, they're still going to melt you out of the passive blocking thing. And you need to be able to, like, the most important thing to do when you're playing the Guardian is, number 1 is finding a purple stone to upgrade your shield to purple, like, straight away. Like, just upgrading the shield is the most important thing, because you need to be able to, like, block combos. Otherwise, you're just stuck with the shitty ass dodge, and if you get hit, it's just terrible. Like, you don't want to have to run this. But in terms of the other perks, I just once again have more guard counter buffs. I have partial HP restoration, which synergizes pretty well if I do block elemental damage. Which, speaking of which, if I do block elemental damage, it is going to classify as me taking an attack, so it is going to give me a damage boost of this as well. And I don't have any of the other character specific relic perks that either give me damage negation or, you know, boost my damage but decrease my health, because this one I kind of like to run more so in solo, where I kind of really need to be able to block attack combos more often, because the enemies are going to be aggro just towards me. Whereas the other one I can kind of afford to run more in trios, where I don't necessarily have to block entire boss combos, because the bosses might be able to, like, change aggro. So yeah. And this one can actually help boost my allies as well. Don't really necessarily need to actually boost my damage negation myself all the time, because it can be pretty risky to actually try and use your skill in the middle of a boss fight. But yeah, those are pretty much the 2 builds that I do run, just nothing but guard counter buffs. Okay, the IRONEYE. There are 2 separate builds that I do run with this character as well. There is going to be like a hybrid melee build, and there is going to be like a pure bow build, which we'll talk about the bow build first. Which, when it does come to a bow build with the IRONEYE, they're going to be like 2 relics that are just super important that you run no matter what. That's going to be 1 +1 character skill use. Because he has like the best character skill in the entire game. It's like an insane iframe dodge. It debuffs enemies, and when you break the debuff, they just take a whole bunch of damage and just a whole bunch of stance damage. And now they can actually just get a whole bunch more damage with this poison ability that we're talking about. But yeah, this +1 skill is amazing. I have it in combination with skill cooldown. Great, fantastic. But the Hjolster boss relic is going to be the next most important thing with your bows, because every single time that you switch weapons, you're just going to be able to get a damage boost, and it just synergizes so well with the bows, because you're going to be sitting at a distance, just keep on firing attacks, and when you have to regenerate your stamina, you might as well just like switch weapons to like the next bow, and just end up resetting the perk, which is like about a 10% damage or a 10-second damage boost. That's going to give you about like 15% more damage depending on what level that you're at. Now, the downside of this playstyle is that it might mean that you have to have like your entire right hand inventory free, which means that those like 3 relic slots or 3 inventory slots are going to have to be dedicated to your bows. Sometimes you might only need just 2. And you kind of want to benefit them having like the same or similar amount of damage as well. Because sometimes you might have like a bow that has a lot less damage and is probably not worth switching to, even with this damage buff. And you probably have to switch twice just to get back to the main damaging bow. So that is going to be one downside. I also have the Sentient Pest boss relic. so it can actually give us some access to poison guaranteed. And when you do proc poison at close range, it is going to give us another damage boost, which definitely do keep that in mind when you are playing with this build. If you feel like you're about to proc poison, just try and be a bit closer with the bow, just so you can benefit off that damage boost. Now, one thing that you might think of is that, like, okay, this poison infusion is going to have my bow do a lot less damage. So when I play with this build, I like to have my poison bow in my left hand and my main damaging bows in my right hand, and I just continuously cycle between those. And I just leave the poison bow equipped at all times, because I'm only going to use it to proc poison. Being that it actually does less damage than all the other bows, it's just going to be for that poison thing, and that is it. But the reason why we are proccing poison is because of this perk. When we do fight poisoned enemies and we hit them with a skill, they're going to take a whole chunk of percentage damage. Now, yes, it did this recently get nerfed, but it still is going to be the best in slot. It's still going to be amazing to run, because it is still going to do a flat 250 damage to enemies alongside 5% of their current HP. So if they have lots of health, it's going to be hitting really hard. But if you're fighting like bosses that are really weak, it's not going to be hitting as hard. You're definitely going to notice like a bit less percentage of damage, but it's still going to be this added damage on top of your character skill, which you can't go wrong with. And now in this Deep of Night game mode, we're going to have a whole bunch more of these like poison relics that we can run, or more damage against poisoned enemies, and these are all going to stack together, or the +1 to the regular versions will stack. We don't unfortunately have a +2 version. We couldn't really find one that didn't have like just really bad downsides, so we're going to run this the regular one with the +1 version. And we can have the poison and vicinity too. So every single time that we proc poison, we're going to get like over 30% more damage just while fighting poisoned enemies. And then when hitting them with the skill, it's going to go to do even more damage. And then keep just having the weapon buffed or the bow buffed with the Hyoster Relic. It's going to be pretty broken. You're going to sit at a distance and actually do decent damage as well, which is pretty silly. Now, I kind of like this playstyle more so for solo, which is probably why you haven't really noticed me using the Evergel or the Night Invader relic here, because I don't really care for those as much in solo. There's less opportunities where that actually does come up. However, in teams, you definitely can, because you're going to have like more time. This trios is so much easier when you're playing in depth 4 or depth 5, because you can clear out so much more of the map. Like day 1 and day 2 is such like a major threat. The bow build is going to make it pretty easy, but for like almost every other playstyle, it's a lot harder. But yeah, I like to run the melee IRONEYE for teams, because the bosses are going to be like somewhat distracted anyway, so I might as well just like have a melee based build where I can actually do more damage, because yeah, the bows can still do decent damage, but they're not going to do as much as like being close and personal with like a hard hitting dexterity weapon. So the fact that I'm not having to use bows means that I can free up that Hyoster Relic and actually can use some other things instead. I do have a +1 character skill use, which is still going to be the most important thing, and I have it in combination with Evergel. That's great. I also have the charged art, actually adding poison to the weapon, which is really good, because you might as well just continue going with the poison-based build. Still same thing applies. I'm just going to have my bow in my left hand, just to have it as a ranged projectile option, just using it to proc poison. And then when I fight enemies that are poisoned, we just spam the skill, and just be at close range, just hitting them with our melee weapon, which it is going to be the katana. Because we do have dormant powers help discover katanas, and katanas are probably going to be the best dexterity weapon type out there, because they get an S-scaling of dexterity, they're all going to get access to status effects as well, and they're really good to use one-handed. Whereas typically some other dexterity weapon types that might arguably be better than the katana, they're probably better power stanced. But being that we're just going to have our bow in our left hand, we only need to benefit of a nice one-handed moveset, which the katana already offers us. So yeah, it's really good. Just having the katana, the spamming attacks, proc the poison. We have partial HP restoration as well, which better synergizes with a melee-based build. We have 2 of them, so it's kind of counterintuitive, but I don't think these 2 +2s stack. If there was like a +1 here, I believe they would have stacked, so that would have been better if one of these was +1, but it's still fine. There's more damage against poisoned enemies, and just having the dormant katanas makes this build plenty strong. As for the Duchess, there are going to be a few different builds that I tend to run. This one I kind of run the least, which is a melee-based build, just spamming status effects. I have my starting weapon come with Bleed with Chilling Mist, so I can actually proc both Frost and Poison, and then I can restage that to get a whole bunch more damage. Have Evergel here as well, And then I just have more damage against frostbitten enemies, and also have like sorcery +2, which is nice because you still want to be able to just use spells, being that you have like a really good intelligence scaling either way. So just spam your spells until you run out of FP, and then you can spam status effects and then restage that. But I still think like a pure spell-based playstyle is just better, being that you can run so many different perks and relics that just help boost your sorcery damage or just any type of affinity damage in general. And I think that just the status effect playstyle is just going to do better with the Executor anyway. Unless you really like the Duchess dodge and you don't really care to play the Executor and you don't really care to use spells, then this type of build is pretty good. But yeah, one of the major builds to run is going to be obviously Crystalline-based spells. Crystalline sorcery buffs are just fantastic because Shattering Crystal is one of the best spells, if not the best spell in the entire game. Easy to use, nice AoE, does ridiculous amounts of damage. And yeah, Crystalline sorcery buffs can just add 12% more damage. Now, I did prioritize having just the character skill attack power increase because it pretty much lets your restage do about 20% more damage. And we also have it in combination with Evergel, which is great. And it comes with a Wraith Calling Bell, which I can't really complain about. Like, it is a nice early game projectile option. I use it sometimes, but mainly we are going to be using Hoarfrost Stomp, which is like the most important thing to run on a Duchess, because Hoarfrost Stomp does scale off dexterity and intelligence, and this is a nice AoE option, which the Duchess tends to lack with her short range dagger. And also, you just gotta proc Frost, which you can restage to just do a bunch more damage. And when you're fighting frostbitten enemies, you're going to be just doing more damage to those as well. And we're not going to really be using any fire damage with the Duchess, so we're not going to be able to like really reset it as often. But as for like the deep relics that we do have, you basically want to use affinity attack power increases. Because the main reason being is because it doesn't really matter what like type of element that you're running. Or if you're using like weapons or spells, you're going to be getting a nice damage boost. And affinity attack power +2 is 10% more damage, which is just as much as +2 sorceries, and it's only just a bit less than Crystalline sorceries. But you actually can have Crystalline sorceries in combination with affinity attack power and sorceries, or either or sorceries or affinity attack power. And I was lucky enough to actually have an affinity attack +1 come with Crystallians. It did come with Dormant Curve Swords, which I'm not going to complain about because they're still dexterity-based weapons. And honestly, I actually like Curve Swords better than daggers anyway, so not going to really complain about that one. The only downside of this is that you're going to have to run from fort to fort or go to rises and have to find, or hopefully that you find Shattering Crystal. But the good thing is about Shattering Crystal as well is that there are 2 separate staves that guarantee to have it, or 2 blue ones as well, in the Crystal Staff and the Rotten Crystal Staff. So there is a pretty good chance that you do get it every single time, but just in case you don't get it, at least you have affinity attack power up increases, and also having more damage against frostbitten enemies is nice, so you can proc Frost, do a bunch more damage, and then spam spells, whatever you get, and it's going to be pretty good. So you want to set yourself up for success either way. You don't always want to have to rely on RNG, which is why I don't really like to just go have like 6 Crystalline sorcery buffs, just in case you don't actually get it. But I do also have a Carrion Slicer build, which I typically like Carrion Slicer more specifically for solo, because it just synergizes really well with her dodge. It's really quick, and it just outputs like ridiculous amounts of damage. And most importantly, it only consumes 4 FP. You don't need to actually have any Starlight Shards at all. You can just pick up Carrion Slicer, use it from start to finish, not have to manage FP. It's just really good. Whereas for the Shattering Crystal build, you might have to get a bit more Starlight Shards. I kind of like it more in trios, where like you can actually have your teammates drop you Starlight Shards too. But when it comes to the Carrion Slicer build, same thing applies. Hoarfrost Stomp is really good. I don't really care to run the Invader Relic or the Evergel Relic in solo as much anymore. So I don't really care to actually have that, because even if I do run it, I'm only going to clear it like 1 or 2 anyway. So I didn't really actually have it in combination with anything here that I wanted to build around. But yeah, we have a bunch of Carrion Sword sorcery increases. And like, as I mentioned earlier, affinity attack power is better. But it is pretty funny to just have a whole bunch of Carrion Sword sorcery increases and just gambling. But to help us gamble, we do have Dormant Power Help Discover Staves. So when you do kill bosses, there's a good chance that we end up finding Carrion Slicer. This one I just like to run for fun in solos. If I don't get Carrion Slicer, good luck. But if we do get it, basically a GG. That's pretty much how that build works. That one's pretty fun. Alrighty, so the Raider. I did lots of testing with him, played many different types of builds and playstyles, didn't find much success because he is the tanking based character and he doesn't really tank as well in this game mode. Like even throughout using his skill, he's still going to take a whole bunch of damage in like depth 4 and depth 5. Isn't going to really be the best. And with him using these larger, slower types of weapons, this like power stance jumping attack build that people like to use isn't going to fare too well either because it's risky and it's going to get you hit and you don't really want to be getting hit that much. So the only builds that I tend to really try to like to use with the Raider would be the ones that just benefit of like just shorter types of openings and like quicker types of attacks, which people did like to use like fist weapons with the Raider. But as I mentioned earlier, fist weapons are just going to do more damage with the Wilder, and they're going to synergize better, being that they're really good at stance breaking, and that the Wilder just synergizes perfectly with stance breaking and critical attack types of builds. So the only build that I really found to be actually uniquely good for the Raider was the initial standard attack build. Just having like 6 initial standard attacks were actually pretty good. Because yeah, they can actually, you can get the initial standard attack increases on the deep relics and they can all stack together. Every single one is 13% more damage to your very first light attack, not to any other attack, just your light attack. No jumping, no running, heavies, nothing like that. And you can just keep spamming the first light attack over and over again and get some decent damage. Like the initial standard attack has always been really good with the Raider, probably has been the best and like the only character that I actually would like to use this perk on. I know some people have used this with the IRONEYE. I made a video about it. It's not that good. Probably is a bit better nowadays because you can actually have 6 of them. But even then, I'll never really use it with the IRONEYE because there are so many relic perks that he benefits off that this build playstyle is not going to be the best. Whereas for the Raider, there aren't many relic perks that he really benefits off. So you can afford to just go into like all initial standard attack increases and just keep spamming the first light attack over and over again, whether it be power stanced or two-handed. You can benefit either way. Like power stancing is going to do more damage, but having your weapon two-handed means that you can block cancel. So you can attack and then block directly afterwards, which like resets the recovery animation. So you can like immediately go into the first light attack and just keep chaining that back and forth. Now, can you actually do this exact same build with a Wilder? Yes, but the Raider is going to have some perks. One, he does do more damage with these larger types of weapons, which initial standard attack is just going to be better with larger types of weapons like colossal weapons, great hammers, and great axes. And also, he's likely to find them too. Whereas if you wanted to run this with the Wilder, you would have to like run a separate relic for dormant powers and have all these initial standard attack increases. And there's just much better stuff to run on the Wilder. But yeah, even though he does have the much better kit, the Raider does have this build for him. I can give him that. Now, I'm not going to run like 6 initial standard attack increases. I'm going to have the one that gives him more damage when taking damage. Because like when I am one-shot sometimes, or like if I am pretty confident, I can still use this skill and tank an attack maybe. Because at least he won't die. So it can be pretty good for that. And it's going to get a whole bunch more damage afterwards. And I do have some partial HP restoration as well, which is like fantastic to play around. Because it synergizes nicely when taking damage with the skill. And also just with damage negation at full HP as well. It's just really good to have. Like partial HP restoration is just so good. Even though it came with reduced rune acquisition, I actually have 2 of them, which is not ideal. I actually might change that up. That's not a good thing. Maybe one of them is just better than this. For the Revenants, there are 2 separate builds that I do use. One is going to be building around Dragon Cult incantations, and the other is around the Godslayer incantations. I feel like when you are playing these spell-based characters, you should be just going all into a particular spell type and try and maximizing the damage, because with 6 relic slots, you can just output ridiculous amounts. And I do like the Dragon Cult incantations better than I do like the Godslayer incantations. So I only really use the Godslayer build when I am fighting Night Lords that are weaker to fire damage or like really resist to lightning. Otherwise, I'm just going to be sticking with the Dragon Cult build because there are more Dragon Cult incantations that I would just like to use as well. Like you have Lightning Spear, you have Lightning Strike, Ancient Dragon's Lightning Spear, Fortis Axes. I think all these options, there's just more of them. Whereas like for the Godslayers, you only have Black Flame and like maybe Scouring Black Flame would want to use as well. Now you do have like the guaranteed spells, which is like Black Flame guaranteed on the Godslayers, and then Lightning Spear guaranteed on the Gravelstone Seal, which are both blue rarity, so they both have like a 1 in 4 chance of appearing. And I still do like Lightning Spear better than Black Flame, despite Black Flame doing more damage. And that is because when you're in like trios and you're fighting bosses, you kind of want to be at a further distance, and Dragon Cult can just be more consistent because it travels in a flat line and it travels faster as well. So Black Flame has like a very good chance of just like missing a lot of enemies sometimes, and that can just feel pretty frustrating. So that's like one of the reasons why I just tend to like it more. But yeah, the build itself has some pretty decent rolls here. Have like the Ghost Flame Explosion, and I have the power up my allies when I do... Yeah, power up allies when I use my ult, which is probably the best perk to run with in trios with the Revenant, because when I use my ult, I give my allies like a 20% damage boost for 30 seconds. Pretty insane, and I also just get damage alongside with it now with the Ghost Flame Explosion. It's just great utility. Can clear out like groups of enemies, or just do a bunch more damage to a boss. And also to have one with just 3 or more seals equipped, which gives you more FP, which is about 100 more FP, and it came with like more damage against frostbitten enemies. Can't really complain about that one. Frostbite tends to be used a lot from a lot of the Nightfarers. Have the magic attack power up, which is pretty cool because it actually boosts the damage of the Ghost Flame Explosion and my starting claws. But for the deep relics, you definitely want to go once again all into affinity attack power, because it's not only going to boost the damage of your spells by 10%, but it's also going to boost the damage of your weapons too. So it's actually just better to have than like improved incantations, because improved incantations +2 is also 10%, but it's just going to be for your spells. Now, it is good when you end up finding like some physical damaging spells like Rotten Breath or Bestial Sling, things like that, but they're pretty far and few, and I would just rather have the affinity attack power because there are pretty good chances that I am using weapons as well. Now, this middle relic that I have right here looks pretty insane. Like, I have improved affinity attack power +2 with the Dragon Cult, because you actually can get both of these things together. That's 12% damage, that's 10% damage. But it comes with Dormant Powers discovers Great Axes. And that's going to override me trying to find seals. So when I kill bosses, there's going to be even less of a chance that I stumble across something like the Gravel Stone Seal. However, you know, there is the relic that gives her more strength, but reduces her faith. And honestly, I'm under like the assumption now, or like I'm actually now of the opinion that I should just be running this all the time, because you only lose 6 faith, but you gain like 25 more strength. And this is pretty much going to give her more damage than the Guardian, but only lose out on like 5% more spell damage. Like I tested out with like a Lightning Spear with this build. I'm only doing like 5% less damage if I have this relic equipped, which is definitely worth it because it just lets you have a melee option if you end up like running out of FP, or you're just trying to save on FP, and it's like doing just more stance damage too, like with these large types of weapons. Like it can't really go wrong with a build like this. Like the only downside is, once again, you're just going to have to rely on RNG that you end up finding a Dragon Cult incantation, because if you don't find one, then your playthrough is going to be a lot harder. But at least you're still going to be perfectly fine with the affinity attack power increases, and you're still going to get like a decent melee option at the very least. But yeah, you're not going to really be surviving very long with this character, especially because her summons just don't really do a good job of distracting at later levels. But I would only really be playing this character in trios anyway. But yeah, when it comes to the Godslayer incantation build, gonna be pretty similar, just like running the 3 Godslayer incantation increases. I do have Evergel alongside with one, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately, I don't have the power up my allies when I use my ult, which I'd rather have that than the power up myself. But this one can be pretty good on solo. It's definitely better to have in solo compared to the other one. And this build also had partial HP restoration, which is nice. But once again, just going all into affinity attack power. I don't actually have the dormant powers this time, so I actually am likely to find seals and more likely to come across the Godslayer's seal in this particular build, so which is nice. But yeah, once again, I'm only going to really use this build when I am fighting those bosses that are weaker to fire damage. Okay, the Recluse. I only have one build for this character because honestly, she's like my least played character. I don't really care to play her that often. If I wanted to play with spells, I'd rather play the Duchess or the Revenants. They have like just more things going for them that I just tend to like more. I don't really like the Recluse's kit that much. I don't like her dodge either. But when I am playing with her, it's just going to be crystal sorceries. Just try and find Shattering Crystal, stack up in Crystallian sorcery buffs, and then just go to town. Like, she's just going to get ridiculous damage with it. And with the fact that she's like likely to find staves already, she's more than likely enough to going to come across a Shattering Crystal in every single playthrough. Sometimes it doesn't, but either way, she can still output some decent damage. Especially if you have the Terra Magica spawning in every single time. It's like 15% more damage if you just stand inside the pool. I actually do like to run this Blood Loss, gives you more damage after using the ult, because it's just like a way to just be able to melt enemies really quickly. Because you can go ahead, pop the ult, the ult itself is going to debuff enemies to make them take 15% more damage, and this perk on top of that's going to be like 20% more damage, and that's going to stack with everything here together. And the only downside is that it decreases your health, but the ult can just give you all that health back, and if you have Shattering Crystal, it's going to come back really quickly. So yeah, it's pretty good stuff. And if you end up finding those perks that just give you more damage when Bleed is procced in a nearby vicinity, that's going to synergize well with that. Now, unfortunately, it didn't come with Crystallian Sorceries. I have one with Carry and Sword Sorcery, which is still perfectly fine if I find Carry and Slicer. Bit more damage there. Just having it as a melee option is good because there really isn't many melee options that the Recluse can run. And I do have Flasks heals allies, which definitely hurts in solo. But I'm only going to really play the Recluse in teams anyway. I don't really care to play it by myself. But when it comes to the deep relics, once again, this crystal-based sorceries, all the other secondary perks that I have here aren't really too crazy. I am actually running the improved intelligence and faith, which is just going to give her a whole bunch more damage. And I do have it in combination with magic attack power up +3, which is probably just better to have than just like this one Crystallian sorcery. I do have like, it has reduced mind, but with her ability to get like her FP back, and with how abundant Starlight Shards can be in this game, and with how much damage you're going to be doing, it's not going to be that big of a deal. Like, this is basically like the only really build that I like to run with the Recluse. Now, when it comes to the Executor, there are only 2 builds that I care to run. The only other build that I would like to run outside of these 2 builds would be like a guard countering build. I know I want to make one of those, but I still wouldn't really care to run it over any of these 2 if I wanted to be like actually serious. Which are 2 builds that I do have is either Frost Seppuku or Poison Chilling Mist. And that's pretty much it. You're either running one of these 2 or you're not doing it right. Now we'll start up with the Poison Chilling Mist first, because this one is a very generic build. Like, this build is like all these 3 relics right here, you can literally just buy. These are guaranteed that you can go ahead and get. The Caligo, Sentient Pest, and like this regular Evergel. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I said that Evergel is not going to be as important in this game mode. Because if you do stumble across some pretty annoying Evergels, they're not really worth fighting half the time, and you're probably better off trying to find some like really powerful weapons. But with the Executor, that's going to be a special exception because you don't really need to find other weapons. You already have your starting katana be really powerful. And that's like the biggest like thing that the Executor has going for him. He doesn't really need to rely on like good RNG to find some decent weapons. You just slap on these specific perks, go into a tunnel, get your katana to purple, and then you automatically have like a high S tier weapon. And now with these depth relics, you can go ahead and stack up more damage against poisoned enemies and frostbitten enemies, and just get a whole bunch more damage. And you can actually turn invisible too, which is extremely beneficial in this game. Because yeah, these enemies hit really hard, and having some more stealth is great. So basically the entire playstyle is just go to a tunnel, make the katana purple, and then spend the entire time just doing Evergels. Like, when I play with this build, even at depth 5, I'm like averaging around about like 4 to 5 Evergels every single time, and it's just worth it. So yeah. Now the other build, which I think I tend to like more, is going to be the Seppuku Frost build. Because it can actually output some more damage, and if you are fighting some enemies like immune to certain status effects, I think I would like this one better, because using Seppuku is going to give you a damage boost, because it is going to proc your passive of the Executor ability, which is going to be 20% more damage, and Seppuku also adds more physical damage on top of the weapon, which is pretty cool. Now, I still am going to run this alongside the Caligo boss relic, and it is mainly just for the invisibility effect, and is doing more damage against frostbitten enemies, which for the deep relics, pretty much the exact same thing, just doing more damage against frostbitten or poisoned enemies. I actually do have a pretty good relic here that actually gives me health regen when the ability is activated, so when I do proc Seppuku on myself, I actually can get some health regen. And there are some times where I like to use Seppuku back to back, because the ability does stack, and so would the health regen. So I use like Seppuku like maybe 2 or 3 times in a row, and then I can pop my ultimates to get all that health back, and then get like over 60% more damage, and actually be in my ultimate, instantly use the skill, and then still have Seppuku buffed. So you can still proc bleed really quickly and proc the frost quickly. It's a pretty broken and silly build. Gonna be a higher skill ceiling though, because it is going to have to involve using Seppuku, which is going to drain some of your health. And you might have to just use more flasks than you otherwise normally would. So that could be a downside, but other than that, I think it's a pretty solid build. If you aren't really confident in the seppuku playstyle, also to note, this ability, HP regen, doesn't actually heal the entire seppuku, because this only heals you for like 10% of your health bar, and seppuku is going to do like 20% of your health bar. So do keep that in mind. It's not going to completely negate it, but it is still somewhat handy, especially if you have those perks that do take build up when below max HP, which is technically below 85% max HP. So that's going to help negate that at least. But yeah, those are basically the two builds I like to run with the Executor. It just depends on the situation. Sometimes if I want to play more safe, I'll run with this one. If I'm feeling a bit more risky and I'm feeling confident, I'll run the seppuku build, because it can actually have a higher skill ceiling with how much damage you can output with this particular passive and seppuku setup. Anyway, that is us now done with that one. I did yap a whole bunch. If there is like something that I missed when covering certain types of relics, and if you have any questions, just let me know down in the comments below. If you want to talk to me in real time and ask questions, definitely follow me on Twitch or join my Discord. I'm just going to link all those things down below if you want to talk to me at all. But yeah, see you guys in the next. Bye.